This hearing will come to order as we continue to adjust staff back to their seats. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us while we were able to produce the 113th Congress official photograph of the Veterans Affairs Committee here in the House. Ms. Mooney, welcome to you. We're breaking ground here. I think, as most members already know, this is the first hearing that I can recall that actually examines the relationship between our committee and the Office of Legislative Affairs, which Ms. Mooney leads. I called this hearing in response to a growing frustration among members in getting from your office what we need to do our work. Whether it's the time of receipt of hearing testimony, responses to requests for information, or the quality of the information provided, we have concerns all the way across the board. Let me start with hearing testimony. Prior to an oversight hearing being called, it has long been a standing practice to provide the administration with a minimum of 2 weeks advance notice of the hearing topic and to request that testimony be delivered no later than 48 hours prior to that hearing. Receiving testimony 48 hours in advance permits the members of this committee and the staff to minimally look at that, gather the information that they need to carefully go through and read that testimony, but also to craft thoughtful questions. But whether VA has provided 2 weeks notice or 2 months notice, it seems that timely receipt of testimony is completely arbitrary. For example, you knew more than a month in advance that we were having a joint hearing with the Armed Services Committee on service member transition issues back in July. Yet the testimony was received late in the afternoon on the day before the hearing. The fact is that your testimony was received in a timely fashion today, 2 days ago, is a good first step, but of course it's not surprising given the topic of this hearing. But from here, we've got to have 100% track record on getting testimony in a timely fashion. That should be the standard. Let me in turn now focus on information requests. We've grown so frustrated with the timely receipt of quality responses from VA that we've had to take extraordinary steps to ensure accountability. First, the ranking member and I launched a Trials in Transparency page on the committee's website detailing the number of outstanding VA requests. Second, I send weekly letters to the department, namely the secretary, reminding them of all the pending requests. In total, we now have 70, some of which remain well over a year old. What is more troubling is that many of the pending requests relate directly to ongoing committee investigations into life safety issues at VA facilities. For example, on January 18, 2013, I requested emails and documents pertaining to a deadly Legionella bacteria outbreak at the Pittsburgh VA Medical Center. As of September 17th, no emails have been provided. Worse, I learned that the media was provided some of the same emails that I had requested in as few as 20 days. The days where VA is more responsive to the media than a congressional oversight committee has to end. And if necessary, I will begin FOIAing that information instead of going through the normal channels and trying to get that information from the central office. Given that 5 veterans are dead as a result of the outbreak, which VA's own Inspector General attributed to VA mismanagement, the committee is engaged in an investigation into this matter to determine what went wrong and to ensure that it never happens again. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a similar sense of urgency from VA to help us with our investigative efforts. Rather, VA's reluctance to provide us with the information we have requested is actually impeding that process. Now look, I understand that many of the delays we experienced are out of your office's control. But whether some other office within VA or OMB is to blame, your office exists as the first point of accountability. If there's a problem somewhere else, it's your job, Ms. Mooney, working with the Secretary if necessary to ensure that those problems are fixed. One final point before I conclude. Your testimony outlines the volumes of congressional inquiries your office responds to on a regular basis. But your office has also received a 41% increase in budget authority and a 40% increase in staff since 2009. Resources have been provided, yet frustration persists on a bipartisan and a bicameral basis. If things don't improve materially, and I'd like to work with you to develop some expectations moving forward, this committee will have no choice but to reconsider the funding that your office receives. VA owes it to America's veterans and taxpayers to engage in an honest conversation about its past mistakes, the future challenges it faces, and its capabilities for overcoming those challenges. Giving Congress timely access to the information it requests is an important part of that conversation. When VA drags its feet in providing information requested by Congress, it inhibits our ability to ensure that America's veterans are receiving the care and benefits that they have earned. Our veterans deserve a VA that sets the standard for openness, honesty, and for transparency. When the department fails to do so, they must answer for that failure. That's what today's hearing is all about. And now I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Michaud, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the title of this unusual hearing makes clear, members of this committee are frustrated and unhappy with VA's legislative affairs approach. That the committee feels compelled to hold this hearing today should send a clear signal that the status quo is unacceptable. I'm certainly aware that the VA receives a large number of congressional inquiries and understand that VA is challenged in responding to over 435 members of Congress and the delegates that represents their respective territories. But high workload is not an excuse for the current situation which has gone on since 2009, and which simply must change. If VA needs additional funding for more staff, we need to know about it. If VA needs to move around some of the 300,000 employees it currently has, we must know about it. If the VA needs to streamline the process in which it operates responding to requests, we need to know about it. We all want to do what's best for our veterans. And in order to do the best job that we can, the committee and the VA simply must have a relationship of trust and cooperation where we inform one another what our needs are to make sure that there's a flow of information quickly and as easily between us. It is my hope that this hearing will result in VA understanding our level of frustration with the current relationship, and that we seek to real commitment from the VA to improve and change that relationship. I am hopeful that working together we can chart a new course forward. For our part, the committee must prioritize request, accept some flexibility for achievable deadlines. We must recognize that from time to time there might be a legitimate disagreement between the committee and VA about the appropriate degree or scope of disclosure of request information. When such disagreements arise, it is incumbent upon VA to set forth its concerns in a timely manner and for us to listen with an objective mind. To set a new course forward, the VA's Office of Legislative Affairs need to make a real commitment to customer service by adopting a yes we will rather than no because attitude. VA OCLA needs to provide regular and ongoing communications regarding the status of our request. There is nothing more frustrating than having to keep checking back with VA on when we expect to get an answer from a request that we've had. And the VA hearing, if they don't give us any information at all, realistic deadlines that are met by the VA are essential. I'm willing to negotiate some due dates when time is critical for the VA to get more information, but we have to know that. Finally, moving forward, I'd like to see VA OCLA adopt the rules of facilitator rather than a filter. There is a perception across the congressional staff, and according to some reports, VA staff, that direct communication is taboo and everything must go through OCLA. And I can give you a personal example. Actually, when one of my staffers spent 2 months over at the VA medical facility here in D.C., and I just wanted to relay to the Undersecretary Petzel that he received extreme, excellent care. Unfortunately, when we try to get hold of Dr. Petzel, we got to find out why do you want to talk to him, and it was just a simple thank you. And those are some of the things that we shouldn't have to go through a lot of red tape to be able to get that information over to the VA. And I do not discount the value of a broad department-wide perspectives can add to a conversation. I do understand and agree that formal department-level positions should be coordinated by OCLA. However, subject matter experts on both sides should feel free and comfortable to discuss their general basic issues. And I stand ready, and I know my colleagues on this committee stand ready to sit down with VA and address our overdue request and work together to come up with a real framework to govern our relationship going forward. This framework needs to be built around 3 goals: customer service, timeliness, and access. Those are the 3 goals I think is important for an ongoing working relationship between this committee, Congress, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. And once again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for having this hearing today, and I yield back to balance my time.
Thank you very much, Mike. With us this morning, members, is the Honorable Joan Mooney, Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Legislative Affairs with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Your complete statement will be entered into the record as part of this hearing. And Ms. Mooney, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Michaud, members of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on VA's work to provide Congress with the information needed to fulfill its oversight responsibilities. VA and Congress share the same goal: to do everything we can to improve the health care benefits and other services delivered to our nation's veterans, their families, and survivors. Over the last few years, Secretary Shinseki and other senior VA leaders and I have welcomed the opportunity to meet with members of this committee and other members of the House and Senate in your offices or back home to hear directly about your concerns and work together to provide veterans benefits and services. I recognize the frustration that committee members and staff sometimes feel regarding timely responses for requests for information and testimony. In many instances, I share this frustration. I respect the important oversight role that this and other congressional committees play in our great democracy. Prior to coming to VA, I served on Capitol Hill for nearly 2 decades, including as Chief of Staff for a senior member of this committee. For that reason, I'm uniquely aware of the demands placed on members of Congress who seek to best represent their constituents and the responsibilities that come with their oversight. VA engages with members of Congress on many fronts, as you know, at our VA medical facilities, benefits regional offices, and cemeteries across the nation. There are VA staff who respond to local requests for information, site visits, and VA participation at town halls and outreach events. VA's Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs is staffed today by 46 dedicated professionals, up from 34 in 2009, half of whom are veterans, a high priority of mine, that help facilitate one of the busiest congressional affairs offices in the federal government. As the second largest federal agency after the Department of Defense, VA provides care to approximately 6.3 million veterans and other beneficiaries, has 1,800 points of health care, provides 3.6 million veterans with disability compensation, and employs over 330,000 people. In short, VA touches every congressional district in a way that's unique among federal agencies. While we can and will do better, the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs has provided an incredible amount of information to members of Congress. During the last 3 fiscal years through August of this year, the Office of Congressional Affairs has supported over 80,000 requests. Those include VA officials testifying at over 260 congressional hearings, conducting over 2,000 congressional briefings or meetings, responding to over 4,700 questions for the record, managing nearly 300 GAO engagements, and facilitating over 75,000 member inquiries. During the last 1.5 fiscal years, VA has responded to over 4,700 formal policy-related requests for information and technical assistance on legislation. This includes 2,000 responses in the first month of this fiscal year alone. Moving forward, VA is committed to looking for ways to improve performance in all its work. Internally, I've been meeting with senior leaders in order to find ways to better prioritize and expedite processes. We can, we must, and we will do better. Let me also offer some additional thoughts on how VA and the committee can work better together to support veterans. We meet regularly with your staff to discuss ways to improve collaboration with the committee, and I believe that these interactions have been productive. Here are some additional suggestions on how we can work better together. First, early collaboration between our staffs. Both parties would benefit from discussion at the outset of the hearing process or a complicated information request. Second, a little bit of advanced knowledge of the committee's overall agenda. Having a refined agenda on legislation would help VA prioritize requests, and discussion on that is critical. Third, discussion on complexity of requests. Sometimes a very large-scale data request comes in and can be complex and may require extra time. In many cases, a slightly modified request can result in a faster, more accurate response, as well as manage expectation. Fourth, prioritization of those requests most important to this committee. Unfortunately, sometimes the sheer volume of work that we receive impedes our ability to provide complete answers in a timely way. When that occurs, we want and need your input on which requests are most important to the committee. While timeliness is an important metric, we believe that accuracy in information we provide to Congress is at least as important. It's important for us to work together to ensure that requests are clear and focused, realistic timelines are set, and adjustments are made to facilitate accurate and appropriate information delivered to this committee. Regarding testimony timelines, while VA strives to meet the committee's 48-hour advance submission rules, we cannot at times meet that deadline, most notably when a hearing is called with short notice or covers a complex subject. Hearings on policy or legislation can raise important, multifaceted, and often new issues that require careful consideration by VA and, in some cases, other agencies. In closing, VA and Congress share the same goal: to do everything we can to improve the health care benefits and other services delivered to our nation's veterans, their families, and survivors. This is what guides our work in providing an incredible volume of information to Congress on a daily basis. We can and must and will do better. VA will continue to look for ways to improve our efficiency and performance in responding to Congress, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify and am prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Your statement gives me many more questions to ask, but let me start off with just a couple now. You've been the head of the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs for over 4 years, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I think it's safe to say that you have put your stamp on that office and the processes by which that office follows. So let me quote excerpts from your confirmation hearing in the Senate and then get your response to some of those statements. When asked what your office's role would be in the preparation of testimony for congressional hearings, you responded that, quote, "It is my understanding that OCLA's staff responsibility is to ensure that testimony is delivered in advance in a timely fashion," end quote. Now, after frustration has been brewing for months with this committee, we began formally tracking the testimony that has come to this committee since April. Testimony has been delivered on time only 11 times out of 21 hearings that we've held. So first I'd want to say, how would you rate OCLA's performance in this area?
I think the overall performance of the department on this area needs great improvement.
Okay. Who's responsible for the late testimony?
I take responsibility for testimony, sir.
Before you were confirmed, Secretary Shinseki had established a goal to respond to congressional inquiries within 2 weeks. So when asked what you thought a reasonable timeline was, you indicated that, quote, standard response goals should range from the same day to 2 weeks, end quote. How would you rank OCLA's performance in this area?
My office does not manage congressional correspondence. We do have a 24-hour turn on our review of them.
Now, this is request for information.
Oh, on request for information, I would say we provide a large amount as quickly as we can, and.
But how do you respond to the fact that the Secretary set a goal of 2 weeks, and we are far beyond that on many requests for information?
On correspondence and items that require.
Now, this is a request for information that should be relatively easy to churn out and give to the committee.
On easy requests for information, that's true, sir. On more complicated requests that require interdepartmental concurrence or with our partners at Labor or Department of Defense, sometimes responses can take longer, and that adds to the complexity.
As long as a year?
Sometimes there are complex situations. If I can answer any specific questions or take them back, I'm happy to do that.
I apologize. It's on our website, and you get a copy of the letter that I send to the Secretary every week. You know what the outstanding requests are, and is it acceptable? Would you allow an employee within your purview to go as long as a year to give you the necessary information that you need to do your job?
I understand and appreciate your frustration, and we work as hard as we can to move those responses out of the program offices and administrations and to you.
Okay, so you wouldn't take any action on an employee that went as long as a year to provide you the information you needed to do your job?
I understand your frustration, sir. I see it clearly.
Okay. Your testimony doesn't mention any metrics for how you evaluate whether or not you are achieving the 2-week goal that you share with the Secretary, nor does your budget submission for your office. And you mentioned at your confirmation hearing that one of the steps you would take is to establish a good tracking system of following up with people. So how long does it take on average to respond to requests for information according to your tracking system?
Our tracking system doesn't track time to respond. It tracks what items are outstanding at this point in time, and we work with the committee as we can, committee staff, to prioritize those requests. First priority is the chairman and the ranking member, and then other members of the committee, then other members of the Congress.
Okay. On January 18th of 2013, we asked for documentation, including emails regarding the Legionella outbreaks in Pittsburgh. As of this morning, very little information has been provided, and we received no emails. Yet it's clear from newspaper reports and other news outlets that media received emails regarding the outbreak through the Freedom of Information Act. Why is the media receiving information, the same information we've asked for, quicker than this Oversight Committee?
Mr. Chairman, the media should not receive it quicker than you receive it. I don't know the nature of that data call, whether it was different or the same as this. I do know the large-scale data call that came in on emails was broad, and we work with your staff to scope it down. I know the work is in progress, and the information should be forthcoming soon.
Okay, the fact remains that we have received no emails, and the media got the information that they requested. Mr. Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Mooney, for being here. As you indicated in your testimony, you have had the advantage of working on both sides of this issue. For those of us who have never worked in an executive agency, have never worked for a large bureaucracy, will you please briefly describe VA's process for responding to formal inquiries from Congress? So walk us through what happens from when the request originally comes in to when a response goes out.
Yes, Mr. Michaud, I'll be happy to do that. A request comes in frequently to my office, or it comes in general to the office of the secretary or to any of our program office leads or undersecretaries. It generally goes to their executive secretary to begin to process the request. Subject matter experts do the drafting, and then if it requires any intra-agency coordination, it's done. My office signs off just to make sure it meets the intent of the letter, basically, and then the Office of General Counsel reviews for legal issues, the Office of Management may review for budget issues, and then the principal reviews and signs it.
And we often refer to formal and informal inquiries. Would you please describe what forms, from your viewpoint, differentiates the two, formal versus informal?
Well, I would say overall, having been on Capitol Hill, a 2-week response to a letter is more reasonable. That was my vantage point then, because a member of Congress makes a statement, they may require more information to answer a response. Here at VA, things require legal review, sometimes budget review, sometimes other reviews within the agency.
So what's the difference between a formal and informal?
Oh,
is everything a formal request, or?
No, we handle, as I said, 70,000 requests for information over the last 3.5 plus fiscal years through August of 13. A lot of those, many of those can be handled very quickly. One of the things that your staff and mine have worked on is briefings. Informal discussions and briefings are good. VA has gone from in FY 2010, 322 engagements over with members of Congress and their staffs, to this fiscal year through August, 891. Those informal conversations are very helpful. I also know that many of your staff have direct contact with folks in the field and throughout VA Central Office, and those provide informal communications as well.
Understanding that each request is unique, generally speaking, what is a reasonable time frame for us to expect a response to formal request, and what about informal requests?
Informal requests, I try to hold, since we're talking about my confirmation hearing, the oft-repeated phrase in our office is what Senator Burr asked me, which is, will you try to tell me what I can have rather than tell me what I can't have? The goal is to get you as much as we can as easily as possible. So we'll work towards briefings, etc. On a formal response, it depends on the subject matter, and it depends on the prioritization of committee rank. The chairman's letters go first, both for the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mooney, thank you for joining us today. Try to get through 3 questions really quickly. You described the process a minute ago as to when a request comes in, what happens inside your office, actually inside the administration to get answers. Just roughly, how many layers of concurrence does a typical question from a congressional office go through in preparing a response?
As I noted, within VA, the subject matter expert looks at it, then somewhere within that office, probably someone looks at it. Then if it's congressional, I just look at it. The Office of Management, if it's a funding-related request. For legal issues, the Office of General Counsel pretty much signs off on everything, and then that's pretty much layers.
Okay. It's my understanding that many of the questions that come to the Hill go through your office are sent by your staff out to the legislative affairs offices in each of the three VA administrations. What's your opinion about taking all those separate legislative teams and putting them together under one umbrella? Would that make the process more efficient?
Well, those folks that work legislative programs for offices and administrations, those are the people that help us collect the information in response to your questions, and we rely on their expertise. This office kind of serves a unique role. So let me take a familiar subject, CBOCs, right? If you call and ask me about a CBOC in your district, that's not just VHA. It's the Office of Management, the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction, of course, General Counsel for legal matters. So working together in a collaborative session, we're able to expedite responses. So if there is a high priority and the chairman articulates it and he says it's his number one priority, we work to move that information as quickly as possible.
Okay. And then you touched on this in general in your testimony. How do you triage a request that comes in terms of ranking it for the timeliness of the response?
We try to handle all of them as fast as we can. We prioritize certain requests, particularly requests from the chairs of committees. But we prioritize them. We try to work the easy ones as quickly as possible. The more complex ones, we try to work with congressional staff on the committees to see if we can break it down into manageable pieces.
Okay. And then the last question is, we've seen numerous incidents throughout the executive branch as a whole as to the impact of politics and responses and dealing with Congress and dealing with the outside world. Tell me, has your office ever been asked by any senior leadership or by the White House to delay or to modify the response to request before an election or within 6 months of an election?
For my office, I'm generally the final sign-off for matters. There are, as you know, OMB Circular A19 requiring OMB review as well. But I know that on a regular basis, I work through deliverables, if not every day, almost every day, moving them through. If I don't do it, someone else in my office does it.
Has the White House ever asked you have they ever edited one of your responses to Congress?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here. And I am a new member of the committee, a very proud member of the committee, and just wanted to add my voice to what the chair and the ranking member in their opening comments wanted to add my voice to their comments, and in terms of sharing a level of frustration about our oversight ability and working together. And as a new member of Congress and a new member of this committee, I feel like I am in a committee where both Democrats and Republicans are working very closely and collaboratively together for a common cause. And I know you and the leadership of the VA shares the same objectives. And it seems to me as though we should be the most productive committee in terms of getting to our goals, because we're all here sharing the same goals and working collaboratively. And as a consequence, sometimes it becomes, I think, frustrating. And Mr. Michaud's construct of what an effective VA a department could be in terms of being customer service, being timely, and being accessible, I think are great parameters and goals of which we need to work towards in order to ensure that we are servicing each and every one of our veterans and all of their individual needs with kid gloves and with great care. So having said that, I had just a very specific question to you. I know a while back I wrote to the Undersecretary Allison Hickey with several of my colleagues actually from this committee requesting the VA match California State's Joint Claims Initiative dollar for dollar. This is something that the state of California had proposed, which would help tackle the over 60,000 pending claims in California. We sent that letter on June the 13th of 2013, and yet we still have not received a response. I'm sorry, I can't
No, that's
quite
okay.
see you. I apologize for that. And my staff has contacted the VA, but we still haven't received a response yet, and the VA did indicate that they were still working on it, but it's been well over 3 months, and it puts me in a precarious situation since I'm trying to represent my state and their issues and they inquire with me, and I have to say, well, I've inquired with the VA, but I still haven't had a response. And so I guess the question is why, and the next question would be, is there anything that we, as members of Congress, should do to help the VA to expedite this process?
I would say on this subject, I know it's of high interest to you. I'll take it back to the Undersecretary. My sensing maybe it's a complex subject matter. It obviously involves resourcing issues. And so I will take it back to Undersecretary Hickey and ask for a quick response.
Well, I thank you for that and appreciate that very much. Secondarily, I know back on July 10th, I think maybe the chair may have alluded to this, but on July 10th, the House Veteran Affairs Committee and the House Armed Services Committee held a hearing on DOD and VA collaboration to assist service members returning to civilian life. And in the past, at least I have been told that this has been a priority for both the Secretary of Veteran Affairs and the Secretary of Defense, but yet in that committee hearing they were asked to attend and didn't attend, and sent some members of their staff to testify on their behalf. And that particular hearing was frustrating to me because the folks that did attend really couldn't address the questions that we were asking, because we really needed the decision makers, at the table to be able to respond to some of our questions. So I was wondering if you could explain the process by which the department really chooses who will testify on behalf of the agency, and what sort of preparation takes place in order to appropriately answer the questions for the committee.
As you know, we do want to send the best witnesses and the most appropriate witnesses to answer your questions. First and foremost, when it involves within VA, we look to the best people to represent, also understanding our mission and ensuring that people who testify as a small part of their duties can actually continue to serve and do things. In the specific example that you offered, we at VA, when it involves interagency testimony, at VA, our practice is to match witnesses. And I think, as you know, the Secretary is very dedicated to the issues at hand here and welcomes the opportunity to testify at any time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Mooney, thanks for your testimony. I'll start off with a personal experience, actually chairing the DAMA subcommittee and sitting in that chair where Chairman Miller's sitting, holding the gavel, and going through a ledge hearing without testimony, going through a markup without testimony, and actually having to ask unanimous consent to the other side to allow it to go forward until we get the information from you so we can sit down with CBO to get a score to see if it's even feasible to move the bill forward. And when you tie all this together and you start looking at everything you're talking about, it parallels all the other issues in the claims backlog in the VA. It's the same issue. Do you need more staff? Is it getting done right? Well, it's complicated. It's not getting all the way done. And it's frankly, you have us waiting the same way you have a lot of veterans hanging out there. So it's something in the DNA in the VA. One question I have, can you provide, and this is about workload with your staff, how many inquiries, briefings, and hearings does a representative usually have assigned to them at one time?
Oh, how many briefing hearings do you all have? Multiple ones?
Does your staff have assigned to them at one time? Workload,
well,
basically.
In terms of legislative hearings, that's an interesting viewpoint. I know in the case that you reference on DAMA, we had shorter notice than we normally have, and on legislative hearings, we have a team of about 3 people doing the work. Largely, our legislative views are managed through the Office of General Counsel, and our staff helps facilitate that activity. So with that, we know that there were, our statistics have 53 bills total were offered at 8 legislative hearings, 33 completed on time, or 62%. If partial views or views without cost considered, VA, the total goes up to 90% of the bills. Of the 15 bills in the category, 14 needed cost only and 5 needed to be completed. The work on legislation is cyclical, and it depends on congressional action. David Ballinger and Joanna Glaze of my office do their best to manage these items with one program analyst, as well as my deputy Bill Delaney and myself, with our Office of General Counsel. That the issue of legislative testimony delays and views and costs are something that we have discussed. They involve General Counsel, the Office of Management for us within VA, and we know there's a challenge there. I have recently engaged, after this last round of bills, with the Office of General Counsel, with the General Counsel himself and his deputy, to find a way to improve this process or to consider what changes need to be made within the agency to facilitate faster views and costs.
Is there someone, i.e. you or someone under you, that actually shepherds the request through the process through all the different departments, or is it just put on someone else's desk and hope they get to it?
It's not that kind of issue. The legislative views are a little different. On oversight matters, we do shepherd very hard every issue. On legislative items, that goes to our Office of General Counsel, where they collaborate with all the internal entities within VA to get it done. We set project management, we set deadlines for them generally of when this is needed, but sometimes requests with short notice on legislative views that require either intra or interagency collaboration are challenged. We understand and recognize the big challenge this last summer, and we are working to change that process.
And one last thing, as a talk a little bit about training, communication, and professionalism. My staff has told me numerous times there are certain people that are awesome at getting back, responding, and there are other people that totally ignore phone calls, voicemails, emails. Is there a training regimen you go through, and how are these people being held accountable? And would they be held accountable if we were to turn their names over to you?
Absolutely. We are a customer service organization. We serve the secretary, but we also serve members of Congress. So if there are issues with any members of our staff, I personally would like to know about them.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Grete McLeod. Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing today. Appreciate that, and I want to thank the Secretary for being here. And I wanted to start out on a positive note. We've had numerous positive interactions with the VA, and one that comes to mind is Steve Murrow, who's the Undersecretary for the Cemeteries Administration. We had a very detailed request related to the Fort Bliss Cemetery, and he was incredibly responsive, and not just in a timely fashion, but in terms of the scope of his response. It was very helpful to us in getting back to our community, because we're trying to hold you accountable. We're held accountable by our constituents, and I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. And I also want to single out your office and General Hickey, who worked with Congressman Flores and myself as we met with the Texas delegation to address long wait times out of the Waco and Houston regional offices for service-connected disability claims. And I thought that was a productive meeting, responsive to our request, and again, a very positive example of how we can work together. To turn to the frustration that we've had in our office, and I want to address this in a cooperative, constructive fashion. We filed a bill that really followed the lead that the VA had set. It's called the Faster Filing Act, and it is a way to encourage, at no cost to the VA or the federal government, veterans to file fully developed claims online. Mm-hmm. It saves you money, the VA, in processing those claims, and it saves the veteran hundreds upon hundreds of days in getting a more timely response, and starting last month, a full year's retroactive benefit. So it's a win for everybody. We introduced the legislation in April. We met with a VBA congressional liaison before we introduced it to vet it with them. We met with them through the process. When it came to subcommittee for markup, there were no comments from the VA. When it went to full committee for markup, there were no comments from the VA. Along the process, because it's a no-cost solution that's going to improve things for everyone involved, we asked the VA to consider implementing the bill administratively. We got a response back to our request. So we introduced it on the 26th. Congressman Cook and I sent a letter June 19th asking it to be adopted administratively. We got a response back from the VA on September 10th, the day before a hearing where we were to discuss these issues with Tom Murphy, the Director of Compensation Services. So that was frustrating in and of itself, the delay. What added insult to injury was the response said that your bill will add undue administrative burdens. It will delay our ability to get a veteran a timely response on their service-connected disability claim. It'll, in essence, make those veterans wait longer in line. It made no logical sense. It was given after the 11th hour. It was incredibly unhelpful. So in the spirit of cooperation, how could we have handled that process better? What could we have done to get a response in a more timely fashion and to work through some of these issues before finding out after the fact that you all had a problem with it?
When we know things are going to be on the schedule for consideration, we should work together. I think in this case we were challenged with a number of bills in the Senate and in the House at the same time, and we can and will do better on legislative use.
I appreciate hearing that, and I also wanted to follow up on one other thing that you said. You referred to yourself as a customer service organization, and I really like to hear that because I think that's the approach the VA should take with its constituents. It's the approach that we take in our office in El Paso, and we track every single constituent case that comes in the door. We age it immediately from the moment that we receive that phone call or the person walks in requesting help, and then I hold my staff accountable. Why has this been out there for 90 days? What are we doing? How do we escalate this? How do we get somebody's attention on this? Why have we not been able to get back to this person with an answer? You said earlier that you do not have a tracking system. Is that something you're open to? I'm a big believer that those things that we measure tend to improve. If you're not measuring response times, how do you expect it to get better?
We do measure response times on many items. On requests for information, we have a knowledge management system that we do track them. We look at the date it came in, and regularly we have collaborative sessions within VA to make sure regularly on a almost daily basis to make sure items are moving along.
So earlier you said you do not have a tracking system, but it sounds like you...
No, I apologize. It's Congressional Knowledge Management System. It doesn't have all the features that I would like it to have, and we are working to get to that point. But yes, on occasion I do share printouts of our Congressional Knowledge Management System items with the staff directors of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Dr. Benishak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your calling upon me here now. Ms. Moody, who in your department is in charge of making sure that you're in compliance with the 48-hour rule for getting the testimony before our committee?
On the testimony, I am, sir.
According to the information we have here, only like 11 of the 21 hearings have had their testimony brought in with that 48-hour rule intact. So you don't have that task assigned to anyone else to be sure that these things occur?
The Congressional Relations Officer that manages the particular hearing does have a project management timeline.
Is there not one person in your department that's in charge of making sure that, other than you, that's in charge of these things are done on time? Somebody bird dogging these people to make sure that the testimony is done on time?
I think there are a number of people that do the bird dogging along the way, sir.
I know, but the problem to me is, this is all a management problem. Your department, as far as I'm concerned, is not being managed properly because half the time you can't get your stuff done on time, and there's nobody responsible for it except for you. I don't understand that. I mean, this is the problem we keep coming up against with the VA time and time again, that you acknowledge that there's a problem, but we're working on it, but still it doesn't produce, and there's nobody responsible but you. Let me ask you another question. Have you gotten a bonus in the last year?
No, sir.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I don't like the fact that there seems to be, non-performance. I mean, I would, if I were you, I would say that there should be somebody in my office who demands that the people get these testimony to our committee on time. I mean, it's not you're in charge of congressional liaison. That should be your number one priority, is making sure that the stuff is here on time.
So, if I may, sir. So we do have people. My deputies, Chris O'Connor and Bill Delaney, work with directors and the Congressional Relations Office. There are a number of people working very hard to ensure that concurrence and collaboration happens so that we get these through the appropriate Office of General Counsel, Office of Management if it has budget implications, and a few concurrences. Frankly, where we are challenged is, and all testimony needs to go to the Office of Management and Budget per OMB Circular A19, but I do want to emphasize they are not generally, if...
Are you saying that's the problem, is those guys?
No, sir. No, sir, they are not. They are partners in this, and not at all.
There's too many partners that you can't do it. Because to me, half-time performance is not, anything to be proud of, or that you can sit there and tell us how, we're working on it, and there's all these things happening, but, we just can't, it's just not happening.
Well, what I appreciate, Congressman, is Congressman Michaud's statement, Congressman Miller, and others to work together to see if we can set realistic deadlines. Understand sometimes 2 weeks notice and 48 hours advance submission of testimony. If there's a chance that we can get a little more time on some hearings, I recognize that even sometimes on complex hearings that require interagency collaboration, it may require a little bit more time, but working together we can get this done, I think.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but my confidence is not that if we made it 3 weeks, that it would be all done on time. See, that I don't have that confidence level from what what I'm seeing here since I've been here. Like Mr. Runyon was talking about, trying to get some legislative hearing, important stuff done, and we don't have the information.
I understand, sir. In the past, we've had, in the past few years even, we've had good records on time testimony, and we will work to achieve that again.
I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank
Mr. Waltz.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member, Ms. Mooney. Thank you both for bringing us together on this. Right, I think our constituents know that when we work together for a common goal, that's the way it's supposed to be. And I can say, and I think everyone in here can say, there are very few places left that it works like this. We're partners for a common goal. Many of us share and work on legislation together. Many of us are friends. Not all, but many of us are. Working together and get it done. But I can tell you something that happens in here. I can request something from the minority staff. If I have a question or need something, I request it from the majority staff, and they return it immediately as if it's a request from a veteran directly. And I know that's your goal too. And I know there are so many good things that go on. But as I've always said, I'm also I'll stand with the VA as your staunchest supporter, but your harshest critic when the time comes to get that. And this issue, if I could, like Mr. O'Rourke, I think, did a nice job offering some of the constructive criticisms. Mr. Runyon's point about many of the issues we're dealing with are echoed by our veterans the same way. And I think that's an interesting one. And I would just like to tell you this one. I introduced a bill with Senator Frank, and they held a hearing over there on June 12th, and we were trying to get feedback from that. That was over 3 months ago. I got that feedback from your office on Tuesday. I got to be honest, I think it would have been better if you'd not given me on Tuesday because I'm somewhat skeptical of why I got it before this hearing. And I don't even care about the time, to be honest with you. I understand, and you're telling us the constraints you have. What I'm most concerned about is the lack of communication and expectations. And it's the same thing my veterans say. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what you're going to say, and I don't know when to expect it. So I'm not complaining about the time. You're managing your workload. I'd like to get it sooner, but it's kind of like, wow, it showed up this week. That's awesome. Well, it didn't help me. And then I think a more pressing problem on this is I could have written the response I was going to get because I knew what you were going to say, and I don't think anybody listened to what we were putting out. This piece of legislation, by the way, is to speed the backlogs of claim. Everybody's trying to do this. I don't write these things just myself. The folks sitting behind you represent millions of people. They help me write it. The comments that I send and ask of you are coming from my veterans, and they don't believe they're being heard. This piece of legislation came out of roundtables, facility tours, everything else. And let me give you an example here. It was Section 2 HR requires the VA to forego unnecessary disability rating examinations when sufficient medical evidence has already been submitted, such as when a veteran submits a DBQ. You know that the rating examinations is the bottleneck. It's one of the biggest ones that's causing us problems. But here's what the VA response says. Well, this is totally unnecessary and duplicative. VA is already allowed to adjudicate a claim without an examination if evidence provided by that claimant is adequate for rating purposes. I know that. You're not doing it. That's why we put it in to make it a requirement. So the feedback came to me, nope, already got it covered, no problem with this, and it went on. 3 months is one thing, but it was 3 months for an expectation I got that everything is just peachy. I didn't think of this idea. Millions of veterans over 30 years thought of the idea, and I was dismissed 3 months later as that it was nothing. And I think here's what I take issue with it. It appears to me totally disregarded or acknowledged that there's things that we can do better. Now, I know that goes beyond where you're setting. The issue here is the expectations, the information, the flow, and all of that. But just like Mr. Runyon said, it sets up the expectations to me. I'm being stonewalled. You know what's best. My veterans don't know. Take this, and we'll get it to you when we can get it. I got to tell you, as someone I hope has developed a reputation for trying to get problems on this that's a horrible precedent and put me in a position where I am really irritated that would happen. I didn't know it was going to get there. When it got there, I pretty expect what you're going to say, we already got this and it's going. So I would just encourage, and on different hearings of trying to get things back to us, the chairman, the ranking member, and other members here are right. What we have to do, and again, I want to acknowledge this, there is incredible work happening at the VA. There are incredible things happening for our veterans, and I do not question anyone's commitment to getting it right for veterans, but something is not working in managing those expectations, getting information back. And I could have accepted this if I would have thought someone actually looked at it. They did not. And my veterans, you go out right now, go out, and every one of these members here, go out and ask your veterans if they think the VA is taking in private medical evidence to help speed their claim on that. They will laugh at you. They know that that's nonsense, and yet I was told, no, don't do it. So now the problem is I didn't get it in time, I don't get a hearing, there's no chance to vote on it, and here we are wondering what can we do about the backlog of claims. It's not my idea, it's the idea of the veterans who brought it forward. So I would just encourage us to figure out a better way to go about this. I think when I hear this, folks here, I've been in other committees where it's disingenuous, members of Congress complaining that we're not working together. I know that's an oxymoron to the public. I know they think that. That's not true in this place. Everyone in this room wants to work together. You and all of your staff wants to work together. So when we're telling you these things, they're in the spirit of constructive criticism to serve veterans. And I thank the chairman and ranking member for making that available. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Ms. Huelskamp, thank you for yielding your position in the questioning to Ms. Wolarski. She needs to leave, and she has a specific question she would like to ask. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My question has been consistent. So I've been here 9 months this month, and the question I had of Secretary Shinseki January, February, was about a CBOC in my 2nd district of the state of Indiana. 54,000 veterans in our district, and I asked for the status of the CBOC. He looked at the guy next to him, and they said, well, you know what, it's on time. And I said, could I have that in writing with a timeline? We've been waiting 8 months for that timeline, and we put repeated requests in through the staff of this committee, through my office, and through our staff as well. And all we received last week was an amazing letter that now this whole project is delayed because of an archaeological problem in the state of Indiana. And I can assure you there's no cities beneath the farmland in the state of Indiana. And then I find out last week the governor's office, the state of Indiana, has never been contacted about this NEPA permit that's holding up the process. So I'm asking you today again in front of C-SPAN and the veterans that are sitting in my district that need help and that need health care, when is this CBOC going to be built, and when can we receive a timeline? Can I get a timeline by the end of close of business today?
Yeah, Congresswoman, I will work to get you a timeline as quickly as possible.
I've been waiting 8 months.
I will work to do that today.
And when will I receive
can't guarantee I'll have it today, but today.
When will I receive? Just give me. Will it be next week? Will it be Monday of next week? Will it be Friday of this week? When will I get a written timeline?
On the overall project?
On the completion date and why there's a delay.
How about if I offer you why there is a delay, Congresswoman?
How about when the completion of the project will be a timeline? It can't be that difficult. There's nothing in the soil in the state of Indiana that has anything other than farmland.
Congresswoman, we will make sure that we get something to you, and I will personally call you and follow up on that.
Bye.
If I can do it by mid-next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant Secretary Mooney, thank you for being here. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you some questions because you oversee the legislative staff, and I want to be able to ask you directly This summer in my district, the California's 36th district in the Coachella Valley area, eastern Riverside County, we launched a veterans initiative. We had multiple problem-solving veterans forums with hundreds of veterans coming together to talk about their issues, their priorities, and solutions, and what we can do together to implement those solutions. And during the veterans forums, I was informed that veterans had problems accessing VA medical services at other hospitals outside their region or their state. One anecdote shared at a forum was of a veteran who was in Las Vegas and could not receive services from the local VA hospital without first going through the cumbersome process of re-registering to receive services at the Las Vegas VA hospital. Can you tell me why a veteran would need to re-register? Is this VA established policy, or is this required by actual law?
Congressman, I'm happy to take that for the record and get you a full response from the department.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also in these veterans forums, one of the most common themes that I heard from my veterans is their lack of access to their health care records. My constituents are confused that very little is being done to address this. And one of the recommendations that was made, which would also address the claims backlog, is that the VA and the Department of Defense work together in some fashion to provide as an exit consultation, the recent veteran a disc of their medical records that they can have and present and work with the VA to have it done. Is anything of that sort being looked at this point, and what do you recommend we can do to work together to make that happen?
I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that?
So many of my constituents said that they have difficulty acquiring their health care records. One, can the VA provide them a disc with their updated VA medical records upon request? Two, is oftentimes when they leave the Department of Defense, become veterans, it takes a long time to get those records from the Department of Defense. Is there any work that we can do so that the VA and Department of Defense can ensure that the men and women in uniform who are going to become veterans receive their medical information in a disc?
I will get you a response for the record. Veterans can download some of their healthcare information through Blue Button and some other initiatives that VA has, My Healthy Vet. And then on the other question with DOD, we work with our partners in the Department of Defense, and I'm happy to get you a response to an interagency request.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I yield back my time.
Are you next? Mr. Huelskamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quick question. Madam Secretary, how do you decide which information request to simply ignore?
Requests are not ignored, Congressman.
Wouldn't you consider a 52-week non-response probably ignoring the question?
Congressman, I know there is a response. I think there is a response forthcoming to your letter.
Which letter do you refer?
I know you have a letter that's outstanding, sir.
52 weeks? Can you explain why you've ignored that question for, 51 and a half weeks perhaps, Madam Secretary?
Congressman, I know that that correspondence is being worked with in the agency, and there will be a response forthcoming.
What is the topic that you're referring to? Because there's a couple different things out there.
Sir, I know that they're working to move all correspondence.
Can you explain why you wait 52 weeks? Seriously, 52 weeks? That's ignoring the response. That's ignoring the question, excuse me.
Congressman, sometimes responses have complex subjects. And
how much did you spend on the 2011 Golden Games? That's a figure. That's a dollar figure. Why have you chosen to ignore that question until maybe sometime in the future?
Congressman, we owe you a response to your request, and I will make sure that happens.
Can you describe again? Please, just answer the question. Why have you not answered that question for 52 weeks?
and a list of numerous others. Have you just said, you know what, we don't like that question, or we don't like, take your pick. I'm just trying to get some insight of why you will ignore a very basic budget question and just say, we don't care? Is that the answer?
Congressman, we are working all the requests that are in front of us right now.
Ma'am, you've told me that for about 11 months. 11 months. You've had people come over and tell me and tell the committee, says, we're working on those. For 52 weeks. We've talked over and over about working together, and I just wish you'd admit to the committee why you're refusing to answer that question.
Congressman.
And that has to do with the Golden Age Games. And something more recently that you've ignored is about 100 days ago, questions that came up in a subcommittee hearing about data insecurity at the VA. Very serious question. 100 days, specifically. Who violated the security? What did you know about it? As you know, that the VA was not forthcoming. It took a whistleblower to tell us what was going on there. But 100 days, is a data insecurity that puts the data and personal, private, banking and private healthcare information, makes that open to the world. Is that something you can ignore for 100 days?
Congressman, we will work to get you a response to your request. I understand and hear your frustration.
Do you not know the reason why you waited 100 days? Or you're just not willing to share that with the entire committee? I not only want a response, I want to know why you're ignoring the issue. 20 million veterans have their private health care information breached. And committee asked questions, the subcommittee chairman right here, no response, no answer. My constituents want to know. They're shocked and outraged by this occurrence. And it continues to grow, and they worry about what's going on at the VA that they won't even answer basic questions about that data insecurity. So your response is, we'll get to you, we'll get to that.
Congressman, we will get you an answer to your...
But can you explain why you won't answer the question for 100 days or 52 weeks? I mean, we've been trying to talk about, well, what's the reason for this, rather than the basic questions. I don't understand how you can be in charge of a shop that can wait 52 weeks on something, basic budget matters, or 100 days on something as critical as private, personal, medical information breached by potentially 9 foreign agents in numerous countries, and no response. Do you know the answer to that and just can't share that here?
Congressman, I think as I mentioned earlier, my office does not manage correspondence. I am happy to take your request back.
This is an information request. Came from the committee. It's on the website. The public, the world knows you're ignoring the question. And I just am very frustrated that not only won't you answer the question, but you continue to give the same responses. We're going to get to it sometime in the future. You won't tell any of my colleagues when we're going to answer your questions. You want to give us the courtesy of saying why you're refusing to answer those. It's the same old denial. And how can we work together? I mean, that's your responsibility to answer these questions. And I guess you were sent here today to say, we'll get back to you on that. So what I see coming out of this committee hearing is another set of questions, another maybe year before you respond. At the end of the day, 20 million veterans have their data breached, and we have no answers on that. And that's very serious. I think it's probably the most serious matter in here that's sitting in there, unanswered questions by a multitude of folks. And it reflects very poorly on administration that's ready to put in the biggest healthcare system expansion in the world in just a few weeks. And the one they're trying to run now with 20 million veterans and their dependents. And you can't answer how is it secure or how it's insecure. And by the way, we'll get back to you sometime in the future. Can you tell me when you might answer those questions?
Congressman, I understand. I hear your frustration. I'll take back your concerns, and we will get you a response.
So you don't know the answer? I don't care if you care about my frustrations. I really don't care about that. I want an answer. Americans want answers. Will you answer that question today? Just say yes or no. Just say, no, I refuse to answer your question.
I'm sorry. I think I said, Congressman, we will get you a response to your question.
When is the question?
As soon. I will work to get it soon.
The answer is no answer. Thank you.
We'll have another round of questions, Mr. Huelskamp. Did I understand you to say that the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs does not handle congressional inquiries from members?
We do handle inquiries. Correspondence is, principals handle their own correspondence throughout the agency.
So your office has absolutely no idea when a member of Congress writes to a principal asking for an answer?
Frequently, letters will come into our office, and they will go to...
No, if I write a letter to Dr. Petzel, you don't know that I wrote a letter to Dr. Petzel?
If it comes to my office for concurrence, yes, I do.
So Dr. Petzel could answer that question, and you would never know that I inquired or he answered the question?
On congressional matters, it would come to my office for concurrence.
Well, I would think that a letter from a member of Congress is a congressional matter.
And it would come to my office for concurrence, yes.
Okay, so you do see those letters, and you don't track them? You don't track what members of Congress are asking through letters of inquiry?
Within my scope of responsibility, which is concurrence on those, yes, Mr. Chairman, I do.
So you do track the letters?
Having a letter come through for concurrence, yes.
Would a letter not come through your office for concurrence?
That is accurate. Congressional letters go out throughout VA.
So I could write a letter, or any member of this committee could write a letter, and you would not go through your office for concurrence?
No, if you were to, say you were to write a letter to your network director or you know, a hospital director, we would not see that, no.
Even I write letters to the secretary and you respond. I'm a little confused, but Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, I think you'd like us to believe today that you're just incredibly incompetent. You know, I don't think that's true. I don't think you're incompetent. I think you're a very smart political operative. And I think what you've engaged in is a process of systematically covering up information that is embarrassing to the Veterans Administration. And I tell you what, I think if General Shinseki keeps you on after this hearing, that he's also complicit in that cover-up, in that systematic process that you've engaged in since 2009. I've got a couple questions here, but I think you're pretty smart, and I know what you're doing. I think the first one, on February 13, 2013, Dr. Petzel told me that he would provide the results of an internal mental health survey by the close of business that day. As of today, no information has been received. Can you explain why the survey I requested has not been provided?
Mr. Kaufman, I think I will go back and check on that and find out the status of it.
In a hearing this past March, I asked for release of the medical inspector reports regarding the medical facilities in Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia, prepared by Dr. Pierce and his staff. The Deputy Undersecretary for Health for Operations and Management at the VHA. The Deputy Undersecretary for Health for Operations and Management at the VHA committed to look into disclosure for the record. Nothing to date has been received. Please explain.
Congressman, I will look into that request for you.
Thanks. Now, I got to tell you, I think it's such an affront to the men and women who have sacrificed so much for this country, who have worn the uniform in this country, that you're in this position. And I think it's also, in my view, an embarrassment to General Shinseki, who has served this country honorably for over 30 years in the United States Army, to have somebody like a political operative like you in this critical position, engaging in this systematic cover-up on information that is embarrassing to the VA. about the mistreatment of the veterans who serve this country. I just think it's extraordinary. And you are not who you appear to be today. This bumbling idiot, this incompetent manager. I know what you're engaged in, and it's wrong. I yield back.
Mr. Mooney, on the 18th of January of this year, the committee asked for documentation, including emails regarding the Legionella outbreak at Pittsburgh. You've already heard me say the media got the answers to their questions before the committee did. You responded that that should not have occurred. I don't know how it occurred, but we haven't received any of the emails yet. Can you please explain why?
I can say in the case of Pittsburgh and the email documents, the request came in. It was a rather, it's a large-scale data pool with, the goal was to focus and scope down search terms, et cetera, with the committee, which we did, and the work is in process and ongoing, and the results should be forthcoming very soon.
I think the words probably, if you put Legionella death, those would be two pretty specific words that you could search pretty quickly. And, again, to Mr. Kaufman, we're not asking these for ourselves and our own benefit. We're asking on behalf of the veterans of this country.
Understood.
And every obstacle that the agency puts up in front of us prevents us from doing our job and oversight. Let's go here. On the 19th of January of this year, we requested information regarding the veteran canteen service. As of today, no information has been received. And what I want to hear from you is, what are the obstacles and where exactly in the bureaucracy does this obstruction occur?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say back to the Legionella, that even Legionella being requested for a whole entire all employees, an entire healthcare network, plus an entire hospital and central office, would be nearly impossible to fulfill. However,
but it's not.
However, we work with your staff to.
I'll take the time back. It is not impossible to do a data search like that. There are software companies all over this country that tell me that you can do a data search of information like that in a relatively quick fashion. And when I say relatively quick, I'm talking about days, not months. And that's where we're at. I mean, we haven't gotten any emails. I mean, you think you could start at least sending us the first tranche, the second tranche, so we could begin our process of sifting through those, just as you sift through them as well. I mean, we know that you're having to read them. You're wanting to read them so that nothing else comes to this committee that you're not aware of that is embarrassing to the department. On the 14th of May of this year, we requested all documents and emails related to VA's Office of Information and Technology's Authority to Operate, or ATO, including waivers of automated information systems from January of 2010 to the present. As of today, zero. No information has been provided. Why haven't we gotten any information from May?
Mr. Chairman, that work is ongoing, and the goal is to get you the emails as soon as possible. We'll have to talk to your staff about which data calls to prioritize. I understand the ATO emails at this point are first, and we are working to produce those right now.
I do want to say that the ranking member and I requested from all members of Congress incidents that they have had with your office in trying to gather information, and we received numerous responses from members, and some of them were pretty specific in the issues that they provided, and I will gladly make that information available to you with the caveat that you assure me that you and your office will work on solving and answering these issues and these problems.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one's a comment and a question. I just want to follow up on a comment that Ms. Brownlee made earlier about the joint hearing we had with dealing with transition from DOD and VA and trying to get veterans to work. And we requested both secretaries to be at that hearing. And I was very critical of the fact that neither secretary showed up at that hearing. And I found out later on, because actually I did talk with Secretary Shinseki, he was willing to come. However, Secretary Hagel was not able to make it, so therefore he did not come. So I do apologize for the Secretary being so critical of him for not showing up. I was told that he refused to come, but that was not the case. So I think it's important to state that for the record. Ms. Mooney, I have a question. What authority do you have internally to the VA to get other parts of the department to work congressional inquiries quickly?
We do prioritize requests. We work to prioritize them for within VA. The chairman's requests come first, committee members. We work with program offices and administrations on a weekly basis to move all items, particular items that the chairman and members of the committee have stated are priorities.
So if you have a priority, but VBA says that's not our priority, and they stonewall that, do you have authority to have a response from VBA? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what authority you have over the different parts of your department.
I have the authority to speak with the undersecretaries of and the assistant secretaries of various program offices and administrations, and I do on a regular basis.
And do they have to respond to you? I know you can speak with them, but do they have to respond, or can they say, well, that's not their priority and do something differently? Or do they have to respond to your priorities?
Everyone takes congressional oversight and your responsibilities very seriously. These are also people who are working to implement, direct, and manage programs and direct services to veterans, so they're balancing priorities. We all work together to respond as quickly, completely as we can to members of Congress.
Okay. And my last question, and I know you mentioned in your testimony and through questioning that sometimes the testimony is late because due to the complex policy questions that arises. I can understand that, but where I can't understand is sometimes your testimony is late at a later hearing that covers the same type of hearing that we've covered already in the past. So why is it? I can see if it's complex the first time around, but if later on we have another hearing in the similar issue, that the testimony is late again, that is concerning. And I know you said that you definitely would do a better job in getting that information to us, and I appreciate that, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it, because as one member of this committee, I do like to read all the testimony before the hearing, and it makes it problematic if we don't get it until the day before, as far as being able to go through the hearing, for the next day. So I'd encourage you to definitely try to stick with the time frame that you said that you want to do it within the 48 hours before the hearing, so we can so we can do our job but more effectively. So once again, I want to thank you for being here today. Look forward to working with you. And I'll just reemphasize, customer service, access, and timeliness is extremely important.
And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, follow up on Mr. Michaud's line of questions. You had said that in the last three and a half years that you have a good record on providing testimony in a timely fashion. Can you tell me, how do you know? What is that record?
we do track these in the monthly performance review, in the PAR, and our strategic plan.
So what is the record?
Let me pull that out for you. Actually, I can provide it for the record if...
Well, it would be nice if you make a comment that you've got a good record that you could back it up for us.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have that. Chris?
Yeah, 98%, I think in FY11, 90% last year.
90% last year and 90% in FY11.
I wholeheartedly disagree. There's no way. And if so, I would be very alarmed if I fell from 98 to 90 to 50%. There obviously is a management problem somewhere.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. We work with this committee and we work with many other committees.
I'm talking about this committee.
I will have to get that.
And I'd be very interested in knowing if other committees get a higher percentage of timely testimony than this committee gets. Mr. Huelskamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up and make sure I understood a few of the responses or lack therein back on the issue of data insecurity. Or are you aware of the subcommittee hearing we had 100 days ago or almost 4 months ago on this issue?
Yes, Congressman.
And you're aware of the questions that came forth from that committee and have received all those questions?
Those questions are being worked and will be provided to you.
Have you answered any questions that were submitted in response to that hearing?
Congressman, we are working to complete all the tasks in front of us.
Have you answered any of the questions that were submitted?
Has VA answered any of the questions? Sir, I'd have to take that for the record and get back to you with that.
Could you ask your assistant behind you? I mean, it's a pretty simple question. Did you answer any of them? Is anybody here? I mean, who's here with you that can answer that?
Sir, I was called as the witness. Our office is a facilitator to get things done. What we do is we work with the program office to answer your questions, to get answers to your questions. And we are working with...
The committee hearing is about not the answers, it's about answering the questions. It seems to be more about process. I just wonder on this particular matter, which is of critical importance, do you know if any question has been answered? And I guess the answer is no, you do not. You're not aware of any answer being submitted yet.
Congressman, we are working to answer all the questions. VA is working to answer all the questions. As Congressman Michaud noted in his opening remarks, our office is a facilitator office.
Okay, well, I'm asking if you facilitated an answer, and it's pretty clear, I guess, you have not answered a single question about data breaches at the Department of VA, their database for 20 million veterans and their dependents. Do you think that's a critical issue if that database is insecure?
Congressman, I will get back with you.
No, the question was, do you think that's a serious issue?
Congressman, I am not an IT expert. I will get back with you with a response for the department.
This is about like the failure to respond for 52 weeks. This is a pretty simple question, ma'am. Yes or no, is it a critical issue if the database might be insecure?
Congressman, your questions are important and we will have answers to them.
How about this question? Is it important? Do you think it's a critical issue if the database might be insecure?
Congressman, as I stated, we will work to get the answers to your questions.
Can you answer the one I just asked? Just say yes or no. Is it impossible to say no or yes?
Yes, it is critical.
Okay. And do you think waiting 100 days for members of Congress and the people we represent to have an assurance that that data is secure is something that has to have an answer in a critical period of time, like days instead of weeks and months?
Congressman, I will make sure that you get a request.
I want to repeat, and maybe you have missed this. I mean, you're a facilitator. But we had testimony in the subcommittee that foreign agents had accessed that database. And when the VA was asked who they were, first after denying the access took place, they had to admit it in a committee hearing. We asked, well, is the data secure now? Tell us how it is. Are we meeting those data security standards that are required in the private sector? Man, we're 100 days past that. Do we know if we had 100 days of access to that data? I mean, where's that? I mean, the response has been from the department in the hearing was this: if you have a problem, if you're somehow your financial records are compromised, we'll provide you helped put it back together. But these are the kind of things you might say, well, that's not too important to get an answer to that. And I understand. All I'm saying here is, man, that is one that people are asking and demanding to know. And if the VA refuses to answer that question, which every day you don't answer is a refusal, 100 days later.
Mr. Huelskamp, Mr. O'Connor has let me know we've briefed the committee on that issue as well.
Could you tell me what the answer is then?
We have briefed the committee on the issue, and
Yeah.
I'll be happy to get you the information for the record with what we can do on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing about the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll follow up on that as well. And as a facilitator, who is responsible for making sure that testimony, inquiries, other information is provided to this committee?
That responsibility lies with me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So let's go back to some of the very first questions that I asked in regards to how do you, after hearing the comments today, how do you grade your office on its performance with this oversight committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would rate us at a B minus, C plus overall for the 3.5 years. And I've heard the concerns that the committee members have offered us today. And I look forward to continuing working to make improvements to get much higher than that.
Well, and I appreciate that candid remark. And I think the ranking member and all the members of this committee want nothing more than the information that we request. We're requesting many, many times on behalf of veterans and constituents that we have in our own constituencies. And then, of course, each of our subcommittees has questions as well. And before I adjourn, I'd like to ask if Mr. Bilirakis has any questions that he wants to ask. Okay, thank you very much. So do you commit to testimony being delivered on 100% on time?
That is our goal, Mr. Chairman.
And you've fallen woefully short of that goal this year, correct?
That is my goal. That is what we strive to achieve, and we can and will do better.
And so have you met that goal this year?
No, Mr. Chairman, we have not.
Do you reaffirm that the 2-week standard on information requests can be met?
I would ask for collaboration on that.
Well, and we, interestingly enough, we give you collaboration, and you took a shot at this committee a little while ago by saying that we did not notice the hearing on time, when in fact you were informally notified that there was going to be a committee hearing, although you did not get the formal notice, so you were aware that it was going to take place. And the other thing that I think it's interesting, you say you don't know what this committee is focusing on. Every year, we do a report that you should have a copy of that tells you what we're going to focus on. Now, if 5 veterans, maybe 6, die in Pittsburgh because of a Legionella outbreak, we may shift the focus just a little bit. But, we will work with you, but I think it's very clear that you need to do a much better job working with this committee and providing it the information it needs in order to do our job. Mr. Michaud, anything you'd like to say? All right, with that, all members will have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is adjourned.